Hi, for this video I'm going to be showing you how to draw and color in perspective. So you might have a lot of drawings that end up looking like this and you're like, wow, I really like how the character turned out. If only there was something I could do about the white void. I'm going to be showing you two tools and how to use them in particular. Most of this is actually going to be done with Clip Studio Paint and Photoshop on my end, but you can do it with just Clip Studio Paint if you have that. So one is enough, but I use both. So I'm just going to go over here. We're going to go to Layer, Ruler / Frame, and then Create Perspective Ruler. It's going to give us a little drop-down option. You can pick how many points you want on it, but like I said, we're starting with 1, so 1 point perspective. And then that's going to give us a bunch of grid lines that I'm going to show you here. Usually the only way to edit these is going to be if you're in the Operations tool, which is just this little box with the little arrow pointing on it. And if you're over here on Object in your subtools. So if you find that you can't move these around because you accidentally misclick and you're like drawing now, and then you're like, wait, I want to change these lines, that would be why. So just make sure that you're on this Operation tool and that you're on this object layer, and then you can click on these little crosshairs to actually move stuff around. So I'm going to explain what these things do. This main blue line is going to be your horizon line, so put that where you need it, and then you have these little crosshairs that you can actually mess with. So you'll see this middle one is actually to move them around. I actually use these kind of as a guide, so I'll lock 2 of them in place and then I'll see where things go. But you can kind of just use this to test on an image to make sure it's in perspective or not. So you can move these around, and it's always the big circle one that you move. If you want to move it up or down, you can by clicking the big circle on the blue line for the horizon line. That'll change that. And then you can also move this left and right. So if you want 1 point perspective from a different angle, then that's how you do that. If you actually want to rotate the horizon line, you can. You just got to click on this. So say you have a slightly tilted or fisheye perspective for something, or just something that's not perfectly regular and it's at a dramatic angle, that's what that would be for. You can also have a little grid that this thing displays. So if you go over here to your subtools, there'll be some grid options here. So you can toggle those on. That's for straight up and down. This is for actual planes of the perspective. So you'll see you can add in these grid lines if that helps you see it. And you can also modify the size of these grids. So if you're drawing something size specific, that might be a useful reference for you. But if it just feels like it's too much noise, you can disable them just by clicking on that. So the perspective will always give you its own layer here. You don't draw directly on this layer. You should always make a new layer and then draw stuff on that. And what this tool will basically do is it has a kind of snap feature to it. So, you know, if you draw left to right, it'll make things perfectly straight. But if you draw semi at an angle, it'll automatically snap it to your perspective. That's how you draw in that. But say you have an image that needs something that's drawn that's round and you don't need it to be in perspective and you're like, well, I can't draw except for this now. If you actually make that layer invisible, and then you actually have your freeform drawing again, and you can draw however many details. I'm kind of just working with the mouse just to show you this stuff. So yeah, if you want to draw with perspective, make sure that this ruler is visible. And if you want to draw freehand, so you're working on a character, just make it invisible. And then you can draw freehand. Just make sure you're on the right layer. And then, like I was mentioning, there's 2 point and 3 point perspectives. So with 2 point, same blue line for the horizon line, but now you get 2 of these, so you can move these around. This is the 3 point perspective. You'll see it's giving you a lot of lines to work with now. These ones you can move around just to help you fine tune things, but the main thing you're always going to be wanting to work on is kind of the end of the cone shape. This is the thing that's actually going to be moving your perspective. So, you know, move your horizon where you want it to be, and then from there you can actually move these into position. So you can move those around. If you want something in worm's eye view, you can have this up here. If you want something in bird's eye view, you can have it up here. I'll actually show you guys how this relates to drawing more later. This is just more actually showing you how the tool works. And again, you still have your grids. So, you know, do with those what you will. If it helps you see something, you can use that. But if it feels over-cluttered, then whatever. But with this, you can have a quick little snap feature. So that way, if you want to draw like a cube in perspective, and there you go. Makes it a lot easier, and the lines automatically snap. Now, a cool thing about this as well is when the perspective tool is enabled and you use something like a selection tool, you'll see it can also automatically be in perspective. So let's just fill those in. It's a neat thing that you can do. It takes a little bit of getting used to with this though, because you'll kind of click to make your selection roughly, but then you'll see if I move it around, it'll change which perspective line it's following. So right now this selection wants to follow the one on the right. This selection wants to follow the one on the left. Choose the one you want, then click again. So it's not going to be a one-click selection. You got to do it twice. So click and drag, move it to where you want it to be, and then click again. And then that'll be how you make your selections. And then, you know, do with that what you will. When you're done with them, you can make them invisible. And then you're done. And then you can draw your characters again. These will be useful for drawings like these. So you'll see I have a drawing of Cynthia, but there's a really complicated background behind her. In a normal drawing, say I want to work on the background or something, you know, I'll be painting this part here and working on that, and then I'll jump over here and work on this part here. But if I need to change something up and I go back here, well, I gotta go to my selection tool and remake that selection again and work on that, then come back over here and remake this selection again and work on this, and you know, it ends up taking a lot of time and it can get really messy. That's where a quick selection map will come into place. The way that these things work, and I'll show you in a much simpler way with this, you'll want really bright colors that are really different from each other. So when you use something like the magic wand tool, it'll automatically pick that color. You just need to make sure that this magic wand is set to refer to the layer that you're editing only, not all layers. If you have it set to all layers, the selections aren't going to be made right. So refer to editing layer only, and then you'll see, oh, I can quickly select just the blue, get rid of that, go back to my subject. Then, you know, I can only work on this part without going out of the lines. But say I want to work on this part over here. What I'll do is I'll bring my quick selection map back up. I'll bring up my magic wand, select only that, make this layer invisible again, go back here, work on this. And then, you know, now I want to work on this other edge, magic wand, select only that part, make sure it's on the right layer though. And then you'll see, make that invisible. And then I'll create a thing. And then, you know, just for the sake of linearity, let's go back into the red that we were already working on. Just make sure you're on the quick selection layer every time you're working on it, because the magic wand is only going to be working with the layer that you're on. So make sure you're always on this layer when you're making your selections. That's important. We got that. Come back over here and let's make this lighter. There you go. We made 3 really quick selections, and pretty much I have the explanation for it over here. The way that these layers work is, you know, we have our hypothetical line art, whether you use it or not. You're going to want your quick selection layer on the top all the time, just so, you know, you can bounce between this and whatever you're working on really quickly. So that'll be our quick selection. You always want this to be bright colors. And you can have many of these if you want. And then on the bottom is the actual thing you're working on, the box. So you'll see that matches over here. It's just I have a bigger version of it over here, because this layer and down, you can have as many layers as you want for working on the things you're going to be working on. But this quick selection layer, whether you have one or just a couple of them, will just be for making those selections. So back to the drawing with Cynthia here. Let's just get rid of her. Say I want to color this part a little bit brighter. What I would do is I would go into my gradient map. I'd make a selection, pick that color, go back out, and then go back over here. And then I can work on just this part and make that a little bit brighter or darker. It's up to you. Say I want to make this part over here a little darker. Bring up my quick selection map, and then I'm going to go over here, click on this, make it invisible, go back to the layer I'm working on, make that darker. So you'll see it's really good for making a bunch of quick selections. Say I want these plates to be a flat color instead of something textured. You can make multiple versions of your selection by going over here to the add selection bar. This is only for a singular selection. If you want to make a couple, click on that. But yeah, so get rid of that, come back over here. Let's say we want to make this a flat color, then bam. There you go. So you'll see we're working with our background very quickly, and we even have our hypothetical line art layer. So yeah, now that I've shown you how these things work, kind of just in a simple version, I'm actually going to be showing you how I use them in the drawing that I'm actually working on. So this is the more how the tool works. I'm going to be showing you now how it applies to the drawing that I'm actually working on. So this is going to be the drawing that we are working with. It's pretty much a character of mine. She's going to be in like a giant aquarium, and there's a big spooky fish in the background.
I'm a giant shark. You best believe I'm going to eat you.
So what I went ahead and did here is I kind of just have a quick rough sketch for what I'm going to be doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the opacity on this. We're going to go to layer, ruler, and then create perspective ruler. Since this one is 3-point perspective, I'm just going to hit 3-point perspective. And like I said, make sure that we're on our selection in our object layer, so that way it'll actually work. Now you'll see that this is why I actually drew things out, because you'll see that the lines I drew kind of follow the perspective already, which will make it much easier than winging it, because sometimes it's hard to, you know, mess around with the ruler and think to yourself, oh, does this look right? How does this work? Where did these go? So if you kind of wing it first and then go back in, it'll make it a lot easier. So I'm just moving these lines, and I'm going to try to line them up. Okay, so I kind of got my perspective in where I want it, and like I said, this was just a rough sketch. Now I'm actually going to start doing the detail work for the line art. So this is the part where I take it from just kind of a rough sketch to it actually has details in it, and I know what I'm going to be painting. Okay, so here you actually get to see all that setup in action. I felt that it was important to describe the actual things that I'm doing first before I actually get into the painting itself. Otherwise, you would see a lot of this and be like, what is going on? But you see, I have the line art for everything, which has been kind of my rough guide. Then after that, I made the quick selection mask for everything. It's more just for the bars than anything else. I can paint everything else behind it without them really, but I still have the quick selection for the windows just so I can add like some edge lighting and stuff to them and select every window individually. So I kept it around just for that. But, you know, most of the perspective work is actually going into the bars. I just feel a little bad because, you know, this is a tutorial for how to draw perspective, and there's actually not much in this drawing. I mean, it's there, you know, it's just not like a huge cityscape or something. I feel like it's really simple. But maybe that's for the best because you actually get to see it in a small and simple application, and you know that it can actually apply to bigger drawings in general. Anyway, here is just the time-lapse part of me working on the actual background itself. I normally don't make this much of the background right away. I make enough of it that I can actually start working on the character once the character's done. Here's just a quick little word of warning for anybody who does cross over and use different programs like I do. The perspective tool will only work in Clip Studio Paint, so once you throw it back into Photoshop, it loses all of the perspective information here. So, you know, you'll keep your drawing, which was on a separate layer, so you'll see my line art's still there. But I mean, the actual perspective grid that I was using is gone. So, you know, that's just an empty layer that I can't be using. So if you are going to be using a crossover method like this, make sure that you have all the perspective drawn out and stuff before you throw it back into Photoshop for editing. Otherwise, you're going to need to reset it up again, which, I mean, you could do. It would just be best to not have to. So, you know, that. Several hours of painting the character and not the background later. Alright, that was a quick time lapse for you, but several days later for me. I hope you guys actually found the tricks that I showed you in this video helpful. If they were, please let me know down in the comments. And if you like what I do and you want to support the channel and get cool art in return, I actually have an online store and a Gumroad. So I'll link those in the description if you want to get yourself some cool art. Anyway, I will see you guys for the next video. Bye!